Hello YouTube, you may have heard of the Greeks. And by that I do not mean the country that is currently called Greece, or alternatively the Hellenic Republic. No, what I'm talking about are the ancient Greeks, the ones circa 4th century BC. If you've heard of these Greeks, then you've probably heard of their greatest scholars, which include Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. They were, and still are, a pretty big deal. They were philosophers, scientists, astronomers, mathematicians, and even music theorists. Bet you didn't know that. And if you did, good job. Yes, they wrote about music. They wrote about what it sounded like, how it was organized, and the theory around music, and they also wrote about how music related to society. The hard part about understanding their writings about music isn't the fact that it's written in ancient Greek. It's actually the fact that we have very little idea what music back then actually sounded like. There was no real system for notating music like we have today, so we're kind of stuck with analyzing little clues we get about, the way it was constructed, how it was used, that kind of thing. There was no real system for notating music like we have today, and there are a few surviving fragments of what music would have sounded like, but other than that, we're pretty much lost in the dark. So while it's all well and good for Plato to tell us that music was comprised of words, melody, and rhythm, and that the melody and rhythm were dependent upon what the words were, we have no real idea what the practical application of that was. One thing we do get is some very specific analysis of the modality that they used when composing their music. Particularly, we get a lot of information about how they used certain modes to depict certain emotions in music. For example, Plato states in his work Republic that if you wanted to express sorrow, you would use a Lydian mode, whereas if you wanted to depict a warlike man, a hero, you would use either Dorian or Phrygian mode. Now you might be thinking, oh, I know those modes. We use those modes in church music and in jazz music. Well, kind of. The modern system of modes was actually inspired by the Greeks, but it was kind of based on a misinterpretation that happened back in the Middle Ages. I won't really go into detail right now and explain the difference between Greek and modern modes, but I'll post some links down in the description if you are interested and want to read more on that. Anyway, enough with the theory. Let's talk about the evidence we have for how music related to society, because I think that's really cool. Aristotle wrote that music directly imitates the passions or states of the soul, and that for that matter, if you listen to music about a certain passion, it will be invoked within you and suddenly you'll be filled with that emotion. He also warns that if you listen to ignoble or degenerate music long enough, you yourself will become contemptible. So I guess in modern application it means that you probably shouldn't listen so much to Kesha, otherwise you might end up brushing your teeth with Jack Daniels. I know that was certainly an argument my parents made when I tried to listen to Eminem when I was in middle school. Alternatively, Plato suggests that music is in and of itself moral and makes everything else better. He suggests that music can add a charm to sadness and also bring life and gaiety to pretty much everything. He also says that music is the essence of order and that it lends to all that is good, just, and beautiful. So in modern words, music can be used to treat depression and also make everything else seem better. Another thing that Plato suggests that I find absolutely awesome is that in order to take the spiritual temperature of an individual or society, one must mark music. Or in other words, in order to kind of test out how someone or a group of people are feeling, you should pay attention to the music they're creating or performing. Socrates, on the other hand, writes about the benefit and also the danger of music. Apparently, musical training deeply impacts your soul. If you have a very good musical training, then it makes you graceful, just as in the opposite, if you have a poorly trained musical training, then it makes you ungraceful. Also, he says this thing that we should just set out right now what all the rules of music are, because with change in how music is analyzed and created comes change in all of society and politics and the general scheme of government, which apparently he doesn't want to change. Sorry, Socrates. It's changed quite a bit since your time. There are obviously many more quotes that I could pull from these great scholars, and I wish I had time to really go through all of them, but I think you kind of understand my point. And if you didn't kind of come to an understanding of my point, I'll fully articulate it for you. Music had a very large part to play in ancient Greece, and obviously this is evidenced by some of the greatest scholars of the time presenting their theories and understandings of music to their students and their readers. In the description thingamabob below, I'm also going to link some translations of these classic works so that you can read them for yourselves and, you know, kind of decipher them and come to your own understanding. And now for something completely different. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw that I was at the American Musicological Society's annual conference this weekend. This year, it was held in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was amazeballs, as I heard one British scholar refer to it. If you wonder what kind of things happen at a musicology conference, it's a very valid question to ask. I really had no idea what to expect the first time I went. But here's the laydown. One of the biggest parts of it is that scholars present papers and ideas that they're working on to an audience of their peers. Titles range from What is Italia to Improvisation, Watermelons, and Steve Reich's Piano Phase. Watermelons. Actually, that paper won an award, so it's pretty good. There were also some great concerts put on by world-class performers, including a concert by Sequentia, which is one of my favorite medieval early music ensembles. People were presented with awards for their scholarly contributions to music history and the Musicology Society. And there was even a Renaissance notation sing-along, which was put on by Early Music America, and that was a blast, because they basically just passed around wine and cheese and everyone tried to read from early music notations. Good time. Basically, musicology conferences are a blast, and if you get the opportunity to go, you really should. There are regional conferences throughout the year, and also every other year they do joint conferences with the Music Theory Society and the Society of Ethnomusicology. These are mega events, and they're really, really entertaining. This coming year's joint conference will be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and if you can swing it, you definitely should be there. Students even get discounted prices, so if you're a student somewhere, you have no excuse. Until next week, darlings, Gaire Pula, which means have a nice day in ancient Greek. I'm such a geek. Musicology.